How's it going, guys?
What's up, Jeff? Great to see you.
Yeah, long
Howdy.
time no see.
Yeah. Oh no, the Saturn V is just barely out of the
Oh,
barely out of the picture. Look at that.
there you go.
Look at that. There you go.
All the
Yeah.
important details. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. The Lego star of the show.
Okay, so we're here today for a fireside chat with Jeff Depa. Before we dive in, always like to start us off with a quick icebreaker. And with summer right around the corner, would love to know, is there like an activity you guys are looking forward to diving into? Pete, you want to start us off?
Yeah, for sure. My so I have a 5-year-old, and he's gonna be doing a bunch of soccer stuff this summer. So we're gonna be going harder and harder on that. So I'm looking forward to that in the fog wrapped soccer fields of San Francisco. It's summer, but it's not really summer. What about you, Jeff?
I love it. Summer for us, we actually can break out a little bit of the nonstop, kid sports things because we're in
Mm.
the peak of spring season right now for baseball and softball. So for me, it will be yes, we'll do some maintenance with the kids from a sports standpoint, but planning a trip or two and getting away and maybe doing a little fishing with my son. So.
Nice. I love it. What about you, Elliot? What's your plan?
Oh, oh man, there's been something that's been on my bucket list for probably like over 5 years now, and it's bungee jumping.
Oh
And
God.
I think I finally like mentally I went skydiving like when I was like 16, and like since then I was like, let me I got like that little bug in me that's been there ever since. And there's some spots in Sacramento and Alameda that I'm looking at. So once the weather's right and I feel like I'm not gonna die, I'll go for it.
As long as it's in a place with decent regulations and you're in not a third world country, bungee jumping is
Yeah.
probably
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, no, it'll be here in California. That's for sure.
good call.
Not at like bungee jumping in Baja when you're down there for a bachelor party. That seems like the worst possible idea, Elliot.
Oh yeah.
Not allowed.
Oh no, yeah, my dad back in the day did it in Mexico, and they just went up some random tower stairwell, and he was there was a mess to be made, that's for sure. Um, okay, I'm gonna get it started, guys. Super excited about the content and takeaways everyone's gonna be getting out of this event. Of course, today's event is brought to you by the team here, Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community, whether in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners that they may not know about. We do that through live sessions like this, in online form, and our quarterly summits. If you're not already a part of MSP, you're going to be invited to join after this event. Before we dive into the event, I'm going to cover some quick housekeeping notes. First of all, this event is being recorded. You're going to be able to access this recording and key takeaways on the previous events page of the MSP website. And second, if there's any questions for our panelists, please do use the Q&A function or the chat, and they'll do their best to get to them during the event. Okay. Right before we dive in, I'm going to pass things over to Pete to talk about Atrium and do some intros. Take it away, Pete.
I'm pumped. So hey folks, my name is Pete Kazanji. A little bit more intros here in a second, but this event is brought to you by Atrium. Atrium is makers of data-driven sales management software that helps sales organizations embed a culture of data-driven sales management, essentially help AESDR, AMCSM managers use data to improve team performance. And one of the great things about it is it continuously monitors dozens and dozens of AE and SDR KPIs and proactively alerts managers, operations, and leadership when something is off with their reps, their teams, and so on. And so what that means is that managers can get to coaching insights faster and drive positive behavior change. So we're just the sales math company here. So that's a little bit on us. For folks who are joining us here today from the MSP community, we're offering folks a cool MSP hoodie if you'd like one. We're going to go ahead and drop the link here in the chat. And you can go ahead and sign up for that. And all we ask for in exchange is a quick disco conversation with one of our lovely account executives over here. So we're going to go ahead and drop that. But I'm pumped to be talking with Jeff here today. Quick intro on me. I am one of the founders of Atrium, but prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company called TalentBin back in 2009 that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And that's really where I went from being a business generalist founder. So like, founder with a product marketing and product management background, to our first seller, and then sales manager, and then sales leader. And that's really where I got into revenue leadership stuff. So after Talentpin was acquired by Monster Worldwide, started Modern Sales Pros, started Atrium, and then also wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales. So that's a little bit on me. Jeff, Jeff here is a CRO at Gainsight. Maybe you can share a little bit about what you spend your time doing, how long you've been at Gainsight, and then a couple of roles before that, so folks kind of understand like where you're coming from.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do have Founding Sales up there on that bookshelf behind me. So
Oh goodness.
I've read it. So shout out to that. But no, so coming up on almost 3 years now at Gainsight as Chief Revenue Officer. Started my career back at Sun Microsystems, and it's
Sun, nice.
Yeah, I'm a Sun guy. It pains me to say that now because Sun is no longer around. It was an amazing company and learned a ton of great stuff back in the day at Sun. Survived 5 years at Oracle post-acquisition of Oracle and Sun, and that was a fascinating environment where you have what at the time was one of the largest software companies and infrastructure companies coming together with very, very disparate cultures. I think would be one great way to characterize it. But it was a lot of learnings in that period of time, and then branched out into the startup world at DataStax, which is in the NoSQL space, and LucidWorks, which is in the search and AI space, and 3 years here now as CRO at Gainsight.
That's awesome. And like, wow, that's like some big iron and like nerdy stuff previously. And like, not to say that like Gainsight's like, not technologically complicated or what have you. Obviously it's market leader and innovator in customer success platforms, but that must have been an interesting shift from like selling to like technologists, especially like LucidWorks, right? Selling to technologists to then selling to like line of business leaders, like customer success leaders, and folks who are kind of more like potentially more interested in business outcomes than kind of technological components. Although I suppose you can have the same sort of sales motion on the on the technology side when you're talking to like the CEO or what have you. What was the biggest change when you moved over to SaaS?
So I will let me respond to that quickly in one way though around my start at Sun. So I actually started in professional services. So my trade was in biomedical engineering and was pretending to go down the med school route, but enjoyed software and tech much more. Went into professional services at Sun, so helped our customers back in the day in Silicon Valley do some really cool stuff. And that was, we had the customers like eBay and PlayStation.com, their first launch when they did the first PlayStation launch, and MLB.com back in those, 2000, 2001. When
it was back when Jeff was the dot and .com, right? Sorry, Sun was.
There you go.
That was Jeff literally like hammering the dot into like eBay or whatever.
Yeah. So I will say, like, coming from the professional services realm, it's never been about just selling infrastructure.
Tech,
it's always been selling that outcome, because I'm the guy that if sales, sold the infrastructure, I had to go put it all together and make it work. And that, back in those days, it was launching a website, it was an ERP launch, it was a corporate email system, it was a number of things that drove different outcomes for customers. And that, by the way, is the thread that's probably just been common throughout my career, is really focusing on what outcomes, exactly. Like, and it's what I'm passionate about. And funny, my dad many years ago, like, I probably got too full of myself after I was, leading one team. It was probably back in the day at Sun, and I was talking about what we were doing at work, and my dad's like, "Don't you just sell computers?" And it definitely brought me down a little bit of a notch. But the reality is, like, we're doing some cool deals. Like, we did a deal with an ad company, and that ad company was capturing data from all these different sources, then using it to go optimize crop yields. I mean, so like fundamentally, you're helping a company drive up crop yields and reduce, famine and hunger and things like that. So, you're a small part of that, but you're enabling part of that. So those outcomes and tying that together is something that's just, gets me super psyched.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel that like Gainsight is like the outcomes company, right? Like helping other organizations focus on outcomes. Which, as you were talking about that, like, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I was like, outcomes, because like I follow Nick Meta on Twitter, and of course I've been like fully incepted into like CX mindset and what have you. What was like the biggest kind of the biggest change when you kind of transitioned from selling a more, or like leading organizations that drove outcomes via a more technologically like geekier solution versus something that like doesn't necessarily require engineering involvement, and it's something that like lands in a less technical part of the organization?
I mean, honestly, it's not incredibly different.
Okay.
The fundamentals are all still there in terms of what you need to go drive with that customer. But I will say that, on both, but more so in kind of a pure play like Gainsight, where we're, more of a business focused application. The reality is what's different about us is, and it's not the case anymore, but if you went back even 3 to 4 years ago, SaaS and more importantly, customer success was a bit of an evangelical sale.
Oh my
So you
gosh.
needed to first the customer that this thing called customer success is actually important. And here's what it is,
Yep.
and here's what it means, before you could actually go sell them a customer success platform or have them realize, oh, I need that, and here's how I do it. So the evangelical nature of that sale is definitely something that's a little bit different. You've got, some of that in almost everything that you sell, but it's very different going to, 20 years ago, back in the day, selling someone, a clustered corporate email server or a SAP or BON implementation where like the demand was there. It was a pure focus on differentiation and how how you could differentiate them to a better outcome versus them not even knowing that they have that problem to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, I think you really hit on something there. Like, I think a lot of the people, as relates to the evangelical sale, a lot of people in the MSP community and probably in our audience today are probably selling. It's not like a better mousetrap per se, because like there is no mousetrap that they're like replacing, right? Like it's a new category of thing that is either not being done or being done very poorly by like piecing together a bunch of stuff. And I think that they can be really tough building a new category because it kind of feels like you're like can feel like you're shouting into the void sometimes. I think you said you're coming up on 3 years, or was it 4 years at Gainsight? And like, yeah, like even now, right? Like a lot of organizations haven't quite wrapped their mind around the fact that like, and like maybe people are like, yeah, of course, like customer success is really important. Like we do it with like emails or something, right? It's like no, right? Like if you're gonna have a CRM for for your AEs and your SEs and your SDRs and what have you, like obviously need some sort of system of record and also like orchestration system for your CSMs, because like 80% of your revenue is like being renewed, right? Like it's not like 20% is being added a year maybe. And so like, what have kind of been the biggest learnings there that you've found in trying to like, push that category forward such that you guys can sell into it?
I think now everyone recognizes the need for CS, but they call it different things. Some people still call it support. Some people still think of it as, it's just support and implementation. Others are like, look, the entire company's business is the business of customer success. But to your point, it's helping people understand very specifically, like, what am I actually doing with this? Am I focused on retaining my customers? Because that's where most people start, which is, gee, I've got a leaky bucket. I've got some churn issues. Like, how do I go solve those churn issues? Until they move along the maturity and recognize that things like, account white space analysis, understanding where I can go cross-sell, position my product not just to go maintain my customer, but expand in other ways, becomes super, super critical. Growing through your product-led growth right now. I mean, that's absolutely critical. Like if you don't have the analytics in your application to understand how your users are actually leveraging a product, where they're falling off, where they're running into issues, what are those sticky features, how the sticky features are adopted, like you're going to get blindsided with churn, you're going to lose opportunity, just all sorts of issues so now I see a big push from, this is something defensively that I need to do to I'm going on offense with customer success. And by the way, it's not just SaaS companies. And this is what we see now. I mean, literally I look at our business last quarter, and we've got a ton of what I'll call legacy companies. So these are not born in the cloud. They're not kind of core SaaS companies, but they're considering themselves digital first companies. Like, I won't use any specific names, but I gave you that example of doing a deal for a big ag company. And they are probably the most traditional large agricultural company on the planet, but yet internally they call themselves a digital first company. And they now have applications and data and software and services that they're bringing to the market in a way that are traditional, or in a way that our born in the cloud SaaS companies are. And so they're starting to now understand, adopt, and drive kind of more focused customer success practices.
Yeah, and like customer success, not just like to renew it, but also to expand and what have you. Well, let's talk. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is just kind of like lessons learned from what is a fairly tenured career, and I think obviously, yeah, exactly. That's like the polite way of saying it. Seasoned.
Yeah.
So I think one thing that I think a lot of folks is like that's top of mind for a lot of folks is when organizations are looking to go international, and like how to go about that. And because I think a lot of organizations nowadays are saying like, hey, you know what, like maybe win rates have depressed a little bit here, and so I need to go like looking further afield in order to like expand my TAM and what have you. And so like they're looking at Europe, or they're looking at APJ or what have you, and kind of like, okay, like how do I address this? What are some kind of like thoughts that you might have on how best to approach that? I mean, I imagine that Gainsight was probably pretty international when you showed up, but then maybe not the case at LucidWorks, but maybe you can kind of share some thoughts on that.
So Gainsight, we've been in Europe for a while now. So when I joined, we've had an established presence across EMEA. We have just opened up Japan.
Neat.
And so we are now in Asia Pacific. And I will say, like, I've done this 3 times. I've done Asia twice. I've done Europe 3 times.
Wow.
And I've definitely learned a lot in each one of those. And there's different ways to go do it. And I think I'm doing it the right way now, but time will tell. Time will tell how everything kind of pans out, especially as it relates to what we're doing in Japan. But historically, I've seen the movie where one path is, I want to go international because I need more TAM. I need to, I've kind of tapped out whatever this market is. So you don't really do the analysis. You don't really understand how does your ICP translate? How do those customers buy? But you think, all right, everybody's in Europe, everybody's in Asia. Let's just go. And you hire like one person, and they're the first person on the ground. All right, you're going to be the unicorn. So you're going to be the sales rep, the SC, the partner person, the CS person, the support person, maybe little fingers on keyboard, whatever it might be.
Janitor.
And so, yeah. And so like I've seen that movie before. I've participated in that movie before, and unfortunately that didn't work because you're a year or 2 in, that person can't necessarily scale. You're not giving them the tools to scale, and you don't have the right expectations in terms of what you can actually go get out of that specific territory. I've seen it the other way, where you go in and you hire, and there's many great resources out there that effectively have entire teams for certain market areas, whether it's Asia Pacific or Europe. And they're like, hey, I've been a country leader at 7 different SaaS companies or what have you, or a theater leader. So just hire me. I'll lift and shift my entire team. And I've done and participated in that movie before as well. And unfortunately, what happens there is that team often has certain expectations in terms of exactly where you're at and what they're going to get from headquarters. And even though you think you're bringing the whole team with them, there's a pretty heavy lift there. I will tell you, for us at Gainsight, especially as it relates to Japan, like we were super thoughtful in terms of how we entered this market, and did a whole bunch of analysis. And this is the one where we actually did partner with a third-party firm, so a company called Japan, that has helped a number of different SaaS companies kind of enter the APJ market. People are like, well, why did you do Japan? Because, oftentimes you think about Asia, it's like, all right, where do we go? Maybe we go into Australia or Singapore or Hong Kong or, all these different spots. there's so many microeconomies and so many micro markets that are super different from each other. For us, what drove Japan is the fact that it's actually the second largest SaaS market on the planet. So outside of the US, it is Japan, and one wouldn't think about that. Now, if you take all of Europe together, like, okay, yes, but if you're looking at a country,
They all speak
a
different
market,
languages. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, Japan is actually a huge SaaS market. So we did a very, very thoughtful kind of TAM analysis and understood, okay, here's what we could go do. But then the next part of it is competitively. Can you actually compete in that market?
Right.
And what we saw was, the Japanese market was at a point where there's a number of customer success platforms moving into it, or local upstarts that are starting up into it.
Really?
And so the viewpoint is, yeah, so if we didn't move there when we did, we would probably see the market to a local player or a local upstart or somebody else that wants to actually really invest. So we kind of looked at the opportunity, and we also made, it's a 3 to 5 year plan. So minimum of a initial set aside 3-year capital investment for everything we needed from people, and we treat that as a separate P&L, candidly, where it's like, all right, we're gonna see this investment through and make sure that we get the returns that we want, but we need to make sure we got the patience for that and that we're realistic. Because it's like before, when we've done a lift and shift, brought an entire team on board that's in all these market areas already, you just assume that, okay, day one they're going to be humming like you're like when you start up the Southeast region or the Northeast region or
Right, exactly.
Super different. And I will say, like, that the need to actually understand not just your TAM, but your song. Like, what is your serviceable, attainable market? How many of these companies do you have marketable contacts and ability to go get to? And are they actually going to be encircled what you're bringing to market? Like, you start to get a rational plan of like, okay, here's what we can actually go do Q1, Q2, Q3, until we start getting some broader momentum.
Well, and I think one of the things that organizations often, I see this a lot, not when folks go internationally, but I work with a lot of early stage sales organizations, and like Atrium has like hundreds and hundreds of customers, so I kind of like end up seeing story a couple times. But when people erroneously think that like a sales motion that works in like this segment right here will like work at this segment right here, like you see this before, like most startups start selling into the mid-market because those organizations are more prone to buy, they're more reactive, and then they move into the enterprise and it turns out it's like a very different sales motion, what have you. Same is kind of, and then the same is true, and I actually want to talk about multi-product after this, but like when you bring on a new product, it's going to be totally different sales motion as well. I think a lot of folks just anticipate like, oh, well, like I'm going to go to England and they speak English, so like it'll probably be the same sales motion, right? Or use like the going like entering Japan or EMEA or what have you, like, oh yeah, like the titles will be the same that we're selling into and the value proposition will be the same and so on and so forth. And I think that folks oftentimes are like in for a rude awakening when they think that they can just like like play the same tune, if you will. What have you kind of seen in terms of like making sure that people are like adjusting and not just like mindlessly copying the existing playbook over, or can you mindlessly copy the existing playbook over?
Yeah, you can't copy the playbook, but you can actually go back a couple chapters. So we Gainsight, every couple of years we kind of turn a page on a new chapter. We're right now what we call G6, so it's chapter 6 for Gainsight. But when you go back to chapter 1, chapter 2, some of the early things that we need to do from an evangelical and community building standpoint to build the CS market are some of the same things that we've started and that we've been doing back in Japan.
Interesting.
But the other thing to think about as well is like localization, especially like, all right, it's not hard to localize a product for England or for the UK, but for Japan, very, very different. And you think about just language, multi-bit character support, and the way things run, like it's vastly different. And so you need to map your sales process to that and understand like how do we go through the demo flow process and all those sorts of things that are very, very different, especially given the language.
Yeah, I would imagine, man, it's funny. Like I was talking with a buddy last night who runs a venture fund, but it's like a startup venture fund, and he was like, oh man, like he's like startups are gnarly, just like getting people like to do the right thing in the right order and what have you. And I think that that's like a helpful way of thinking about these things, is like all the things that like you had humming in like the US or whatever, like, oh yeah, like, you know, our demo instance, it works. Right? Or like, you know, we have our red line process, or, you know, what, like our MSA, like, oh yeah, like no one's ever thought about the fact that like, yeah, we just update our MSA with a new date every year and it's like fine. All those things that are like baked in and already on just like autopilot, you have to like just, you don't have to like reimagine them, you just have to like revalidate them. Right? Like, does this still work? Oh no, this MSA is in like English, that's a problem. Or like, oh yeah, like our demo instance doesn't work in you know, it doesn't work in Japan because, you know, the population isn't like as English friendly as it has been. Man, I guess we didn't realize that. Hey, engineering, guess what? We need your help on these sort of things. So like, just I guess like not taking things for granted, and I suppose that kind of speaks to the person or the people that you're going to have there, kind of like who that human looks like. And I hear what you're saying about like, you don't want to pretend that there's going to be like some sort of unicorn there that like is going to like all singing, all dancing. But just like the appropriate expectations there, where it's not like someone who's expecting to be plugged into a system that is like completely has no sharp edges and just like run, versus like, hey, like you're gonna like run into like some issues, and like that's okay, because that's what we're paying you for, is to like catch those bugs. What does that person look like? It says like, I mean, it sounds like you've done some theater lead stuff before yourself. Like, what is that like? What are the characteristics associated with that human?
Well, it's the one thing I will say, but before I directly answer that question, though, is it can't just be one person.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things we did here for Gainsight is, you know, moving an expat, moving somebody who is well established within the company, knows how to, you know, pardon the French, just GSD, is connected well enough to raise issues at different levels, cross function within the organization. Absolutely critical. So in addition to hiring an incredibly strong kind of country theater leader, also having somebody that you can pair them with that, you know, can be in theater alongside them and be a great conduit right back to headquarters and to kind of the executive decision making prowess of the company becomes really, really important. For that first person, you know, I will say, like, I've been super pleased with the partnership that we've had with Japan Cloud. They've helped us kind of bring on and hire the local team there. And we've brought somebody that has been in the SaaS space. So they were out of Tableau and Salesforce, you know, knows how to sell SaaS, knows all of the appropriate contacts within the market. But I will say I put a lot of trust, and I'm glad I did, in our partner there from a hiring standpoint, even bringing on that leader, because what you will find is like Japan's very different. Like, more often than not, people aren't going to speak great English, or very little English. And you know, what you don't want to do is have just a language barrier become an issue to finding the best talent for that market. And I think a lot of companies come in and they want to hire somebody that speaks perfect English and then Japanese, as opposed to go find the person that is local in market and can speak perfect Japanese, and we'll figure out how to go pair it up and deal with that later. And that was a little bit of a leap at first, but it's proven to be the right thing to go do.
I love it. Well, so I want to change gear. I want to change gears a little bit and talk about leadership versus management. Like, I think that there is you know, when people think about, like, oftentimes people conflate the two, right? And they kind of don't think about them as being different. And I know that, like, you know, when you're the CRO, you know, kind of the weight can kind of like lean more towards leadership versus management. But you, of course, you don't want to take your hands entirely off the wheel, so to speak. But you want to have like the right amount of like deference to your deputies and what have you. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how you think about like leadership versus you know, direct management.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to context versus control. It is it's a challenging dynamic because, fundamentally as someone as a revenue leader, like you just want to jump in and get things done and make sure that they're moving forward and driving and operate the business. But it's like that old, seeing the forest through the trees or what have you. Like sometimes you need to take a step back and understand that the best thing to do is focus a little bit more on strategy and strategic time and how you get that message across, how it's being responded to by the field. Are we doing the right things? And that has been, it's always a challenge with the tyranny of the now. Especially, I know we're all facing right now, at least everybody in the SaaS world is facing a pretty different market today than it was 3 quarters ago, 4 quarters ago. And so like you are deep in the data, in the analytics, trying to understand how do we respond, how do we shift, how do we adapt with this rapidly changing market. And sometimes you can get yourself too deep in that, and you don't necessarily delegate effectively and focus on getting that vision through there. So I think it's really, really critical to kind of start with that vision and that culture process, but then put in a leader, a management system that your team can execute within, where everyone knows what they're accountable for. And by the way, and that's why part of the reason why we use Atrium, because it helps us for one of the things that I talk about all the time, which is, I call it AIR, activities, indicators, and results. And how do we operate the business and understand, are we tracking in the right way? And is what we're doing on a day-to-day basis driving the indicators that tell us that we're going to go get where we think we need to be, whatever that might be, bookings, revenue, GRR, obviously at the top line. But then I'll say the last thing that I would say kind of about leadership versus management is like, managing is kind of, trust but verify, going in, making sure that your team's doing what they say they're doing. But if you're leading, you're really like any your sales leader, you're focused on probably there's like 7 or 8 key things that you need to be focused on, right? Am I increasing the selling time for my team? Am I taking away administrative and giving them the time back to where they can be in their genius zone? Am I giving them more at bats? Are we finding more opportunities for them to go out there and take a swing and have a deal? Am I helping them improve their win rates with it be enablement, things like that? I mean, just across the board, you need to be thinking about what you're doing to go move those needles, which actually make an impact for the broader part of your team. Because I heard this old, many years ago, somebody asked me like, well, are you a PowerPoint or an Excel sales leader? And, they're trying to get, are you back there managing your forecast, or are you in front of a customer driving a deal? And the reality is you have to balance and being able to context switch between both.
Yeah. Well, on the vision thing, I know I would love for you to kind of share vision and culture, thing. I would love for you to share a little bit about how you guys approach that at Gainsight, because, I've had the benefit of working with a number of current Gainsight Gainsight employees and leaders, but also like former folks as well. And the organization has like a very distinctive and like deep, very positive, like everyone I work with there is like delightful culture. And I think you kind of mentioned this about like G6 and G5 and G4. Maybe you can kind of characterize a little bit about like how that, that vision setting process, like vision that is then connected into like the things that go into that works at Gainsight, so folks can kind of, see inside the machine.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, culture is super important for us. I mean, candidly, I think it has to be for everyone these days. And that was one of the things, like when I made the shift over to Gainsight, other than the fact that I love the ability to go sell outcomes and help my customers achieve their outcomes, it was culture. When I evaluate an opportunity, it's like people, culture, technology in that order. And, it starts at the top. It starts with Nick. I mean, Gainsight set the mission statement years ago to prove that you can win in business while being human first. And there's a serious focus on that. And in fact, before I even came on board, I had multiple sessions with Nick, like hour-long sessions where we were talking about what does it actually mean to live the values of Gainsight and to be a leader that actually lives the values of Gainsight. So it's not just something that's up on, the break room wall or, something that, gets tossed, bantered about in like an all hands. Like it's in everything that we do. And people are celebrated and they see these values have a positive impact, and they see how everyone across the company can be additive to the culture. Now, that's just the foundation. I mean, cultural foundation is absolutely critical for us. But in terms of how we then set the strategy, so G5, G6, it's a matter of taking a step back and going, all right, what were we doing? What worked? What didn't work? And where do we need to focus our priorities to get to that next hill in this, series of mountains that we're climbing? We do, and I know everyone's got their own kind of path. We do one-page, OPSPs, one-page strategic plans. We start at the top, and candidly, we start very early. I mean, it is, we're just in day 3 of Q2 right now. We'll start this strategic planning process for next year in very short order this summer, as we start to look through, all right, where do we need to be February 1st for the turn of the next fiscal year. But we start that at the top. And I will say what Nick, our CEO, does an amazing job of is, yes, we come in with a hypothesis of how we think we need to go shift the strategy. But more importantly, we seek input from our employees. We do roundtables, at all levels of the company. Seek input from our advisory board members. Seek input from our customers. I mean, Nick, I'm sure everyone knows, is super vocal on LinkedIn, and so you'll see a lot of kind of what is coalescing into our strategy from kind of being crowdsourced from that standpoint. Really key to get all of that input, but we take those 3 to 5 top strategic priorities, and then those get broken down departmentally. And we make sure that we've got alignment with metrics and objectives, in each of those, from the department level all the way up to the top line company number and kind of company focus, and then, roll that out more broadly to the organization.
Yeah, I think we're like, regardless of how people go about these things, like whether to do like OKRs or V2 Mom or whatever. I think just like making sure that the entire organization is kind of like singing from the same hymnal. Once you get above like a certain size of organization, right? Like, if it's, if you got a 10 or a 30 person organization and everyone's kind of like, you can fit them all in a Zoom room together or in a conference room together, it's one thing. But like, once you start getting beyond that, just making sure that people like, they know what the higher order bid is for that quarter or that year. Probably not for that quarter, right? But like, they know what the higher order bid is for that year. So in the absence of direct specification on what they ought to be doing at that point in time, then like they can self-direct and be like, oh, right, like this is the year of GRR, or this is the year of going up market, or this is the year of, cross-sell or what have you. And am I doing that right now? Or like, is the action I'm doing like that's in front of me right now related to that like that North Star? I think that's underappreciated. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I think one of the things that's important there, though, is when we tell the team and the company, here's where directionally that we're focused. It's also key to say, here's what we're not going to go do. Because too often these planning processes turn into 733 different priorities at all different levels. And it's like, okay, we're going to end up doing everything, right? And so the question is like, we have to make some bets and some trade-offs. There's certain things we're just not going to go do, as much as in a certain pocket of business, that might be the number one thing that person, that team, wants or needs, but we're not going to go do it because we can't put all the wood behind that arrow, and it's not going to move the needle more than these other priorities. So making sure people know what those are so they can get off those positions and refocus, I think, is important as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, I said, like, it's okay to say we're not doing that thing, right? Like, we're not gonna do that thing because it's funny. Like, one of the things that we think about at Atrium is like every positive metric can also have a metric that kind of like points in the other direction too. It's like a back check. Like, you might think like, oh, okay, cool. Like, higher ASP is great. But higher ASP is great as long as it's not like completely tanking your win rate, right? Or completely like tanking your sales cycle. And it's almost like what you need to do is just make sure that there's like a back check on that. Like, oh yeah, more opportunities and more pipelines, good. Unless your untouched opportunities counts like go through the roof and it's like too much pipeline for you to handle, right? So I think that like just like having a back check on these things can be really important. And I know that that's not exactly what you're saying there as relates to like, hey, we're not going to do this thing, but I think it's like important for people to be able to say to have those back checks on themselves.
It makes sense though, because this is where a lot of these things fall apart. Like we talk about in certain areas where like we can all debate passionately, but disagree and commit. But I think there's a part to that where it's disagree, commit, but accept the consequence, both positive and negative, because every decision you make is going to have a positive. So you can't say like, go take that hill, but I'm not willing to go spend any money to do it or what have you. Like there's always some offset there that you need to acknowledge and agree that, okay, that's going to be the hit that we're going to take to go make that bet. Let's accept it and move on. But in certain areas, you have these priorities and they filter down, and people's individual incentives and alignments are not mapped in such a way where they're actually at odds with what the top line corporate priority is. And that can be super frustrating for the team.
Yeah, like I'll give you an example there that's like really close to home for us at Atrium. You know, as the kind of like SaaS market has kind of been very turbulent recently, one of the things that we've been doing is redirecting a lot of our go-to-market resources more up market, not like way up market, but one of the things that we've found, and you noted this earlier, Jeff, is that the value proposition of Atrium around helping organizations help their managers manage by metric is it's great from like small organizations up to big organizations, but when you get to like a lot more like bigger organizations where they have like more than 5 managers or more than 10 managers, you now want to have like consistency in how the managers are managing. Like essentially there's like the sales playbook and then there's the manager playbook. Like these are the meetings that we have and these are the assets that we have in it. And so that was something that we realized about a year ago, that we had this like ancillary value proposition that was particularly resonant up market. And so what we've done is we've redirected a lot of our go-to-market resources, a lot of our pipe gen, a lot of our sales calories to that. But for the like as we were navigating that transition, like all of a sudden like deal cycles started elongating. Not surprising, right? Like, come on, right? You're gonna like you're going from selling 3 seats of Atrium to a Series A company, or a series 5 seats of Atrium to a Series B company or whatever, to selling 10 or 20 or 40 or whatever to these larger organizations. Like, guess what? There's a lot more meetings involved. There's a lot more stakeholders, what have you. And so you could have been like freaking out, like, whoa, what happened? Like, these like quick deals that we're dropping like every month or so, like where'd those go? It's like the sky falling. It's like, no, there's a strategic redirection, right? And we all bought in on this for like for appropriate reasons, and like this was the thing that we expected would have shown up. Now what we're also doing is measuring the leading indicators of success on that change, because if those don't show up, maybe your hypothesis was wrong, and that's important for you to react to. But if the leading indicators of success are showing up on that strategy, like in our case, like, hey, look, in these larger organizations, like deals are making it to stage 3, they are making it to stage 4, right? It just turns out that they take like 10 days longer or 15 days longer in each of those stages. Okay, cool. I'm not like losing my mind, because I am seeing the forward progress there. Yes, deal cycles are elongating, but this is happening. Cool. No one freak out. Nothing's on fire here, right? And I think that that's like something that like anytime you're navigating a strategic change, not only do you want to have like alignment on that and just make sure that everyone is like bought in, and then bought in on like the potential downsides of that, like, oh, win rates may go down or deal cycles may elongate, but then also you're measuring like, okay, if this is successful, we ought to see these things, and we ought to see this stuff. And just at least, I mean, you don't have to be as precise about it as we are, because like we're the sales nerds, but at least like have a recollection of that can be very important.
Yeah, and those, and that's where again I come back to that phraseology I use, activity, indicator, and results. Like, do you truly understand the activities that drive the indicators that impact the results? And more often than not, we're only focused on the result, and we're only looking at bookings. And okay, if that booking didn't get there, or the revenue is not where it needs to be, then clearly it's a sales execution problem, or it's just a sales issue, or this or that. And it's like, well, no, like let's understand all of that, because there's a lot when you're going into, whether it's a new market, when you're talking about going up market, like there's a lot of different shifts that you need to contemplate. Like, where are you potentially falling down or running into issues?
Yeah, and if for folks who are as Jeff talks about AIR, like activities, indicators, and results, a really great resource to read up on that is that there's a book called Cracking the Sales Management Code by Jason Jordan that kind of like unpacks that concept. I think he uses a different acronym and like maybe, I don't know, they're all, it's like synonyms, but it's a really great, it's kind of like the Bible of data-driven sales management, or at least like data-driven like sales organizations. Michelle, his kind of research partner, Michelle Vazana, wrote another book called Crushing Quota that is more about applying that specifically to like tactical sales management. It's another absolutely fantastic resource as well. The one other thing I wanted to make sure that we got in here, because you had mentioned this earlier a little bit as relates to product-led growth and instrumentation of like sticky features and so on and so forth. I know that Gainsight at this point has a number of like ancillary a number of ancillary products, and like selling like multi-product sales is kind of a it's like there's like black diamond skiing and there's like double black diamond skiing, and so I thought that it might be useful for you to kind of share. I forget the name of the analytics product that you guys have. Might be useful to share some of the learnings. What is it called again?
Gainsight PX.
Right. It might be useful for you to share some learnings with folks who might be expanding into secondary products and what have you.
Yeah, happy to, because it's a good analogy going from single to double black diamond with moguls, because I do think a lot of folks just assume existing sales team, we can just throw this product on their backs and boom, they're off to the races, and they'll position everything the way that you want them to position it. Then you start to peel back the layers of the onion, and there's so many different ways that you can go to market. Do you have a specialist sales team? Do you have an overlay sales team? Do you have completely separate sales teams? You have to start looking at what is the actual sales cycle between these two products. We had a challenge early on, and we had multiple products, and we actually have kind of three core products now. Obviously, our core Gainsight CS platform. We've got PX, which is a product experience, in-app engagement, in-app analytics, very core to like digital CS and some of the use cases that we're going after. And then we've got a community platform that helps you drive growth through your community through advocacy and self-service from that standpoint. But each one of them, if you treat them as a standalone land, is a little bit different. And there's multiple different ways that you can go to market. And when you think about our product experience, what we bring to the table there, you can go sell that to a chief product officer. You can go sell that to a chief customer officer. And the answer is, it depends on where that customer's at in your journey. So you got to figure out, where am I at, and how do I choose which one of those cycles that I pursue? Because each one of them are markedly different. So for us, it's been a little bit of an evolution from having this product, how we've integrated it into the platform, what use cases it actually drives. And I would say we've probably led the market, a bit in terms of the vision, tying together both, growth through your product as well as through your CS, community and your CSM team. But it was, and I will say we've adjusted a number of times based on where we're at in that maturity curve, right? Mm-hmm. Who's primed for selling that product? How does that get priced and packaged into the core baseline of the CS platform and what we bring to market on a day-to-day basis? How are we attacking the market? Am I selling to my existing install base? Am I selling to net new customers? Do I have the brand awareness in a secondary product to go land that as a standalone land? So all of these things kind of come into play, and we've had to evolve our go-to-market as we've matured, both in terms of brand awareness, how tightly integrated the capability is, and ultimately the offering and impact that we can go have in a customer's business as a result of it. I think what's super compelling now is I think everyone is hearing and on what we call the digital CS journey, which right now is, efficiency. How do I do more with less? Like, people understand customer success, but it used to be like, what, I'm going to do CSMs at the top tier of my business, and they'll just be a tech touch, kind of low engagement journey at the bottom end that's all automated. Well, the reality is you need digital across your entire spectrum of your accounts. Right. And PX and in-app is one way that you can go drive that. So we've got that all integrated in a full end-to-end digital CS offering now that is, super well timed for what we're seeing in the market.
How did you, when you guys started selling PX originally, how did you guys approach that? Did you guys have like the core Gainsight sales field selling that? Did you have like overlays to start? How did you guys skin that cat?
So we are in a few chapters of that, and
Totally.
we actually,
I mean, you have to iterate.
Yeah. So we brought on that product before I was on board, and initially had a separate standalone sales team.
Okay.
And we've kind of maneuvered around that and moved into a practice model where we had a core sales team with practice specialists, because the reality is there are some nuances to that product. It's a little bit different, especially if you're going deep into a product buyer. It's much different than talking to a head of CS. So what we've attempted to go do is to some extent have our cake and eat it too, where we've got a core Gainsight seller, but we've got the deep practice level expertise where we can paratroop in when it gets below, let's say, a 100 or 200 level discussion. We've got to go into that highly specialized 400 level discussion. So we've blended that model. But moving into this year, with how the product is evolved and how everything is integrated, we've leaned more heavily into, we have a core Gainsight seller, and they sell effectively everything on the truck. And yes, we have some specialization behind the board, but given the product integration, that's the right path for us as it stands now.
Yeah. I mean, when I was at Monster, after they acquired TalentBin, that was like my big learning, was that like multi-product sales is just like a total bear cat. Especially like the larger the organization gets, especially when like the buyer is like a different human being. I mean, I know that like LinkedIn, for like the longest time, like they had these like fairly massive like stovepiped sales organization. You had the what was it, LinkedIn talents, like LTS, LinkedIn Talent Solutions, and they had LMS, like LinkedIn Marketing Solutions, and like LSS, LinkedIn Sales Solutions, for like the longest time. Like meant like many 100-person sales organizations, because the sales nav people are selling to sales operations and sales leadership. The marketing folks are selling, and I think the reason why they did that was not because they like to have a high cost of sales, but what they recognized was that like if you're talking to a different human with like different needs, it's pretty tough for a single rep to inhabit the the minds of like both of those different personas, who are like very divergent, like the marketer versus the sales leader versus the director of talent. And like I just don't know, or like I think there's very few organizations that do extremely well. Like Oracle's probably, like very acquisitive organizations like Oracle and Cisco and maybe IBM back in the day, SAP, etc. But have gotten that together. But otherwise, it definitely requires like a lot of iteration and a lot of testing. And as you kind of note, it's been like multiple chapters there. So for folks who are listening at home, like if you have multi-product, like don't be surprised if it takes like multiple iterations to get there.
Yeah, because what you're going to find is the market's going to shift. And I'll get the question like, well, gee, why are we doing it this way? Because didn't we kind of do it this way a couple of years ago? Well, the markets shift dramatically in terms of brand awareness, in terms of our product integration, in terms of what they're asking for. So when that happens, you need to be able to go adapt to that. And I do agree. I mean, when you have all these disparate sales teams and then you bring it together and you ask one person to sell everything, the other thing you run into often is, let's just say some weird stuff happens from a discounting perspective, where it's like, all right, I'm incentivizing the rep to try and deliver the whole platform, and they will do it through whatever means possible, which might means like, I'm just going to go give this product away effectively for free and buried in a discount of the second product. So it's really hard to actually understand the analytics behind your business. Where is the customer finding value? What's actually driving that outcome? So that can be a road I've been down.
Yeah. Elliot, you here to kick us out, man?
I am. So I want to thank everyone for attending today's event. Big thank you to our sponsor of today's event, Atrium. Make sure to check them out. Links are in the chat for some goodies. Thank you to Pete and Jeff for providing the content. Recordings and key takeaways are going to be available on our page shortly. Don't forget to check out our upcoming events. We'll see you guys next time. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Jeff. See ya.
Yeah.
Take care.